Hey everyone, it is Haley here, also known as Gabrielle for the Facebook folks. And today we will be talking about Aimee Semple-McPherson, her ministry and her life. This is one of my favorite God's generals. She just has a really interesting life. I think you guys will enjoy it, so we'll jump right in. So it starts with Aimee Semple-McPherson was born Aimee Kennedy on October 9th, 1890, near Ingersoll, Ontario in Canada. So right off the bat, we see, as compared with the other God's generals that we've studied, a lot of them were being raised up in the late 1800s. So this is kind of interesting to correlate with history. We see the late 1800s being a very revolutionized era with cars coming out soon and big machines like farm equipment, a lot of technology coming out. So we see this booming industry coming out with technology, and then we also see a revival for God's kingdom. So this is really great. So it's just an encouragement even for right now, in the 2020s, that we see all kind of things happening with AI. So the God's people should really be coming up just like they did in the late 1800s with all the changes in the world. We know that God's word never changes, and that his kingdom, we are supposed to be spreading that as Christians. So we're going to, like I said, read about Aimee, who definitely spread God's kingdom in her time. So we'll continue. Aimee's mother was an orphan whose foster parents were in the Salvation Army. Her father was a Methodist. Her mother dedicated her to God's service when she was a baby. Aimee was a born expositor and began to speak as early as 13. That's cool. Unfortunately, it wasn't always for God's service. At 15 years old, she was holding debates with local pastors on the validity of evolution versus the Bible. That's what I'm saying. She started off, her life is just so interesting. So then when Aimee was 17, hoping to turn her life around, her father took her to hear a Pentecostal evangelist named Robert Semple. Aimee was struck by the brown-haired, blue-eyed Scotch-Irish evangelist. She immediately became a seeker in the Pentecostal circles and regularly attended their meetings. She felt that God was calling her to save lost souls, but she did not know how this could be accomplished. In 1908, Semple asked her to marry him, and she accepted. They were married on August 12, 1908. God was calling Semple to China, so Aimee felt that this would be the fulfillment of God's request. They started a small church in Canada and spent time raising money for their missionary journey. 2 years after they were married, they had raised enough to venture out. They sailed for Ireland and visited Robert's parents. Then they stopped in England and stayed with the philanthropist Cecil Paulhill. He was holding a large Christian meeting and asked Aimee to speak. Surprised and terrified, she agreed. When she got up to speak, there were 15,000 people in attendance. Her Bible opened to a passage, and suddenly Aimee was overcome with the sense of God. She preached an hour-long sermon without notes or practice. It was startling to her. She had received a token of what was to come. Yeah, we'll see. The Semples arrived in Hong Kong in June of 1910. Robert hired an interpreter and began to preach to the local inhabitants. Aimee and Robert saw incredible opportunity for spreading the gospel. A crisis arose when only 2 months after their arrival, both Semples became ill and were hospitalized with malaria and dysentery. Aimee was pregnant and close to delivery. On August 17, 1910, just 5 days after their second wedding anniversary, Robert died. Oh no! Aimee was devastated. All their dreams seemed destroyed. On September 17th, a healthy baby girl was born. Aimee named her Roberta Starr, after her father, and in the belief that she was a star of hope that God had given her in the grief. Aimee returned to the United States to be with her mother, now living in New York, doing work for the Salvation Army. Aimee met Harold Stewart McPherson, a 23-year-old accountant from Providence, Rhode Island. They married in the spring of 1912. Aimee became pregnant immediately and had a son they named Rolf in March of 1913. She went into a deep postpartum depression. During the months of illness, God spoke to her over and over and over to go evangelize. She struggled against the call. Doctors operated, but her health continued to fail. At one point, the nurses attending her had given her up for dead. Oh my. The voice came one last time, saying, "Now will you go?" She knew she was facing a life and death decision. Finally, she broke down and told God that she would go. She was fully well within 2 weeks. Okay, this is so much like a lot of the other God's generals' lives that we've read about, where they had a call on them. They knew they had a call, and they tried to fulfill it and maybe like backslid a little bit or whatever. And then there came a life and death situation where the Lord spoke to them again and said, "Listen, I told you once already to do this for me, but you haven't submitted the whole way. Maybe you've submitted partially, but not the whole way. And this is your chance to submit the whole way." And so she submitted 100% to Jesus, and then she was fully healed within 2 weeks. So that's really great. So we're coming up on like kind of a little sad part. In 1915, Aimee attended a Pentecostal camp meeting in Kitchener, Ontario, where she was baptized in the Holy Spirit. She immediately went to the small town of Mount Forest, Ontario. She advertised an evangelistic meeting, but no one came. Deciding she must do something to draw a crowd, she took a chair to the downtown area and stood immobile for an hour. That's funny. About 50 people came to watch the spectacle. After an hour, she cried out, "Follow me," and people followed her where she preached her message. That was it. Her ministry took off, and she held meetings over the next several days. Okay, so, you know how the Bible talks about, like, signs and wonders? So, I think that's kind of what she was doing, like, it's a wonder, you know, like, they're wondering what she's doing, standing there not moving for a long period of time. So we'll see, her ministry was filled with with a lot of those wonders. Like, a wonder can be something wonderful, like amazing happening, like a healing or something, but it can also be something that makes people wonder, or it piques their curiosity. So that's what she was known for. In 1916, Aimee purchased a car. She painted slogans on it and called it her Full Gospel Car. In 1917, she started a paper, The Bridal Call. She received ordination papers from the Assemblies of God in 1918. She also held a Methodist exhorter license and a Baptist preaching license. By 1919, Aimee, her mother, and the 2 children started traveling across the country and settled in Los Angeles. So we see, among like further reading, we see that her husband did not submit to this. Like, he wanted his like little accountant business and just wanted to be very comfortable in his life. He didn't submit to the Lord's call. So, but Aimee did, because she saw, okay, like the Lord healed me. I was on my deathbed, so now I told him I would preach, so I need to keep good on that word. So she continued to go, and like thankfully her mom went with her and her 2 kids. And actually, one testimony I remember reading about her is her kids' shoes. They desperately needed new shoes when she was on the road, but she didn't have any money. So they prayed over the shoes, and the shoes like visibly grew to fit the kids' feet. And they had those same shoes for years, even though they were growing kids, and that shouldn't have happened. So that was like a really cool little miracle there. So she really trusted the Lord with her whole heart, which was awesome. And so then we'll continue, though, with the scenario with her husband. So it says her husband, losing his wife and son to the traveling ministry, became increasingly opposed to her work. So he didn't want to have anything to do with it. He divorced her in 1921 on grounds of abandonment for preaching the gospel. So feeling the need to reach larger interdenominational groups, McPherson then dropped her ordination with the Assemblies of God in 1922. Aimee's ministry was dynamic. She saw thousands saved and healed during her evangelistic meetings. Her presentations were dramatic and designed to draw crowds. She was so popular that she purchased land and built a 5,000-person seating church, entirely debt-free. That's fantastic. This was called the Angelus Temple in Echo Park. She and her family were constantly on the road speaking to raise money for the project. She had not originally seen Angelus Temple as a church, but a platform for her to speak. In 1923, she also opened a Bible school, the lighthouse of international Foursquare evangelism. In 1924, she started a radio broadcast from the temple, a groundbreaking work for her and other ministries. She was a busy and popular woman. So, yeah, you guys may have heard of like the International Foursquare ministry. So that was, what she was into. And she also did radio, which is really cool. Again, so, we see all the technology with like radio and then later TV. So we see a lot of bad things on the radio and TV, but these were examples of people who used radio, television, and the modern technology to reach more people. I know Aimee was known for kind of putting on these like plays of actors acting out scenes from the Bible, which is really cool, and it drew a lot of people, and it was a really good way to evangelize, because hey, if someone's going to go watch a movie or a play and see all this sinful stuff, you might as well have a play for them to watch that's going to bring them to the Lord. So that's exactly what she did. And so then it says, during the Depression, so the late 1920s, early 30s, the Depression era in the United States, the Angelus Temple opened the Angelus Temple's Foursquare Commissary, designed to serve the poor with food and clothing. That's great. So she's kind of getting back to her Salvation Army roots there, that she grew up with her parents working in the Salvation Army. That's kind of cool, because that's a lot of what the Salvation Army did, and then she kind of used that on her own too. And it says, members at the Foursquare baked bread in mass quantities, sewed quilts, provided school lunches, and opened soup kitchens. Aimee was able to get donations of food, money, and clothing where others could not. This was a critical point in helping with the welfare of thousands of poor and starving in the Los Angeles area, because remember, it was the Depression. Aimee was married again in 1931 to David Hutton, but the marriage did not last long. Aw. And then it says Aimee died in 1944. Aimee's legacy is threefold. Her use of the dramatic arts to reach the lost was unprecedented in her time. She used the latest technology to further the gospel. Finally, she reached out to the poor to provide when others could not. And another point to make here is with her parents, I think it was like her mother, it said that was an orphan. She would probably have a humble heart to want to help the poor, knowing that her parents had been helped in that way. So that, again, that's the Lord using different things that you've gone through in your lives to help you to minister to others. So that's another area where she was used for. She taught a full gospel message and regularly saw thousands of healings and miracles in her meetings. Yes, that's awesome. So again, she was known for the signs and wonders that made people wonder and contemplate the gospel message. So yes, I hope you all were encouraged by this. I know, like I said, she's one of my favorite God's generals. I think her ministry is just really cool. And so as always, faith is a muscle. Use it or lose it. And I just pray blessings on each one of you, and that each one of you would be able to fully live out the plans that God has for you. And I encourage you to use any sort of platform you have at work, on social media, in your family, in your friend circles. Use that platform that you have to bring God glory and to get his gospel message out. Blessings on y'all, and thank you all. Have a great day.